Recording. It's recording.
There's one more spot in here. Don't try to get second in order or that we're supposed to go there. Yeah. No, I think it's versus. Oh, okay.
All right.
My name is Arisha, and I bring you Unit 3 judges tonight.
Good morning. Please be seated. All right, good morning, Unit 3. We'll have the judges introduce ourselves, have you introduce yourselves, and then we'll start. My name is Henry Ng. I'm a prosecutor with the Sparks City Attorney's Office and a We the People one.
I am Diane Donato, and I work for Nevada Center for Civic Engagement, and I'm a retired school district teacher, and I'm now teaching high school at Minogue.
Morning, everyone. I'm Peter Grema. I'm an attorney, and I'm also a We the People alum, and I'm clerking for Justice K. Ashton in that Supreme Court.
Hi, I'm Rihanna Alfonso.
Hi, I'm Lyndon Berry.
Hi, I'm Shayla McPeak.
Hi, I'm Leah Ruiz, and we are Unit 3 from Edward C. Lee High School.
Wonderful. Today we have chosen the following question. Thomas Jefferson opposed frequent constitutional changes, but wrote that laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. How has the Constitution been reinterpreted or amended to go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind? Looking back on the nation's 250-year history, has the Constitution's amendment process described in Article 5 suffice to allow for the changes Jefferson referenced? Explain. Should the Constitution be interpreted as a living document or interpreted based on its original understanding? After you take a breath, you may begin.
The Constitution has been reinterpreted through judicial decisions and amended through the Article 5 process to evolve with society, as seen through the Commitment to Equality. Constitutional scholar Akil Reed Amar argued the post-Civil War 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments introduced a new vision of equality that transformed the nation by abolishing slavery, securing birthright citizenship, and extending voting rights.
Judicial review has been crucial. In UC versus Bakke in 1978, the Davis Medical School reserved 16 out of 100 spots for minority students. White applicant Alan Bakke was more qualified and denied twice. He sued stating violations of the 14th Amendment and Civil Rights Act of 1964. The Supreme Court ruled racial quotas were unconstitutional, but race could be used as a factor in admissions. Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard in 2023 struck down affirmative action under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause.
Progress of the human mind brought national women's suffrage. In Lester versus Garnett in 1922, 2 years after the 19th Amendment was ratified, Oscar Lesser argued the 19th Amendment unconstitutionally contradicted Maryland's male-only suffrage law because Maryland had not ratified the amendment. The Supreme Court stated that state laws could not block the amendment process, and the 19th Amendment was properly ratified, denying his request.
The Constitution's amendment process, as described in Article 5, does not allow for the changes Jefferson referenced. Jefferson, in a 1789 letter to James Madison, argued that the earth belongs in usufruct to the living, and the Constitution naturally expires every 19 or so years. To enforce a non-updated Constitution was an act of force, not a right.
Since the ratification of the 27th Amendment in 1992, which was proposed in September of 1789, or 1,400 amendments have been proposed, none ratified. Jefferson believed the Constitution should be amended with each new generation, yet the most recently proposed amendment to be ratified is the 26th in 1971. Article 5 requires 2/3 vote from Congress and 3/4 from the states. As in a country as divided as today, it would appear to be pretty much impossible.
While original intent should be understood and valued, the Constitution should be interpreted as a living document for it to be applicable as society evolves. In Katz versus United States, the court struck down warrantless wiretapping as a violation of the Fourth Amendment's reasonable expectation of privacy. As technology evolves, so must interpretations of the Fourth Amendment.
In Trop v. Duels, 1958, the court ruled that taking away a person's citizenship for wartime desertion constituted cruel and unusual punishment. Chief Justice Earl Warren wrote that the Eighth Amendment must draw its meaning from the evolving standards of decency that mark the progress of a maturing society.
In Loving v. Virginia, 1967, the court struck down state laws banning interracial marriage. In Obergefell v. Hodges, 2015, the court struck down state laws banning same-sex marriage. Both rulings were consistent with progress of the human mind, but the controversy is whether unelected justices should set national standards or let each state progress at their own pace through representative legislation. Dissenting justices in Obergefell said that the majority opinion dangerously strayed from the democratic process and greatly expanded the power of the judiciary beyond what the Constitution allows.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my first question is, if you were to propose a constitutional amendment, what would it be and why?
I would make amends to our Fourth Amendment privacy because of AI. AI algorithms contain sensitive information about people's health, political position, and even sexual affiliations.
I would make amends to Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, which talks about the presidential requirements. The current requirements are you must be at least 35 years old, be a resident for at least 14 years in the United States, and be a natural-born citizen. I would propose that you must, as Commander-in-Chief, be held to the same standards as your militia. Meaning, if you deny someone into the military because they have a felony, we should not allow one to command one with 34 felonies.
I would repropose the Equal Rights Amendment, as when it was first proposed in the 70s, it did not get ratified by the required 3/4 states as mentioned in the Article 5 of the Constitution. However, after the 7-year deadline, 3/4 of the states have ratified the amendment. Therefore, I would repropose it as now that we have progressed more as a society, I can see no reason why 3/4 of the states would not ratify it within the deadline.
In Gideon v. Wainwright, took the negative right of having a state-appointed attorney and turned it into a positive right, requiring that all states give the attorney to the people. I would make an amendment that would take the,
So you guys talked about the fact that Jefferson wanted us to change the Constitution every 19 years, and that we haven't had a new amendment in quite some time. Reversing that, what might our government have been like today and life in America be like if we hadn't made any amendments to the Constitution and we left it stagnant? What might life be like?
Like James Madison said in his Federalist Number 49, that's rewriting the Constitution constantly would create instability, and leaders would manipulate every new convention, and that stability was way more important than constant reinvention.
We would have to live in a world where, unless judicial review was still established in Marbury versus Madison, where the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, would have not been ratified. Women would still not have voting rights, which the 19th Amendment gave us. And the voting age would not have been lowered to 18 as the 26th Amendment gave us.
If we didn't have amendments, the Constitution wouldn't be applicable, especially to minority groups who fight for women's suffrage for the 19th Amendment. And during the Vietnam War era, we were protesting with our First Amendment to lower the voting age to 18 with the 26th Amendment.
I don't believe society would have progressed at all under those standards. People have always been trying to fight for a better life. Everybody has been trying to fight for a better life, and you can see that through our nation's history. We would not have been able to survive with the same rules that we did back in the 1700s before we were a unified nation.
why should we care that the Constitution hasn't been amended? You mentioned during your answers the Equal Rights Amendment. Nevada has an Equal Rights Amendment in our state constitution, and so do 26 other states. So why are we so focused on our federal constitution when we can enact those changes on a state level?
Well, Congress in the Commerce Clause found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 gives Congress broad authority to regulate interstate commerce. In Heart of Atlanta Motel versus U.S. in 1964, black African Americans weren't given a room in the motel. So the Supreme Court decided that Congress does have the power to regulate interstate commerce, and therefore Congress had the power to enforce the Civil Rights Acts of 1964.
With the Equal Rights Amendment in Nevada, yes, Nevada does have it as part of their constitution. However, if I were to move to a different state that did not have that as a part of their constitution, with the equal pay for equal work, many states that don't have that constitution, that still does not apply. So I want to become an environmental engineer. If I stayed in Nevada, I could be paid equally as a man I work with. However, if I went to a different state without that, then I would get paid less. There's a possibility of me getting paid less. If we made this at a federal level, then no matter which state I moved to, I would still have that right to equal pay for equal work.
We also rely heavily on judicial review, which poses the fear of certain big cases like Obergefell v. Hodges, and the risk that they could get overturned like Roe v. Wade was.
So I'm glad you mentioned judicial review. So I kind of want to focus on the second part of this question, is reinterpretation. You guys talked about, in Obergefell, the criticism was it's unelected justices. The Trump administration has, issued executive orders saying that only the president and his attorney general can interpret the federal law. He has an executive order banning birthright citizenship, saying the Supreme Court interpreted it wrong. What role does the president have when it comes to reinterpretation of the Constitution, and should they have that role?
When interpreting the Constitution, the president can be checked by the Youngstown test, which tests his broad authority over his enumerated powers. For example, he wasn't allowed to seize steel mills, President Truman.
President Trump, under the Youngstown test, for his new executive orders such as 14160 and 14125, he's using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act.
What are those executive orders?
14160, overturning of birthright citizenship, and Executive Order 14125 is the imposing of tariffs.
I don't believe that the president should have as much power in interpreting the Constitution. In Federalist Number 78 by Alexander Hamilton, he states that the judicial branch has the power to interpret the Constitution because they, not being elected, are supposed to stay away from partisan bias.
The president uses executive orders as a way to interpret the Constitution. However, the judicial branch and the legislative branch can execute their checks and balances to check the president. We can see this with the judicial branch checking the president's executive order, or checking the president, and whether or not Congress can give the president rules on how to hire or fire for the legislative or for his executive agencies, and we can see this with Trump versus Slaughter.
We go back to one of the cases you mentioned in your opening statement, Students for Fair Admissions. Do you think the Supreme Court got it right in terms of increasing diversity in our student body population, or do you think it takes us back to where it's more difficult for people of color to enter elite higher education institutions?
People should be, when taking into account affirmative action, you must look at, affirmative action looks primarily on somebody's race. You should look instead at the struggles they have been through and what they have been through in their life, rather than the color of their skin in admissions.
Could Could you restate your question, please?
So do you think the Supreme Court, do you agree with the Supreme Court's decision in Students for Fair Admissions in light of the diversification we've had in our, student body? Like, I'm thinking Gen Z is one of the most diverse groups race-wise. Do you think that that decision helps factor and account for that diversity, or is it a step in the opposite direction where for some groups it's still harder to gain admission into elite universities like Harvard?
In 2003, with Grotter versus Bollinger, Sandra Day O'Connor said that affirmative action is justifiable currently, but it is expected in 25 years to no longer be necessary.
I disagree with the decision of the court, as we have narrowly tailored admissions as a way for those who had harder backgrounds or those who have been discriminated against, as a way for them to still have opportunities in college and have those opportunities that many other people have.
So I know you mentioned when you were asked what amendment you would propose now, and I think a couple of you answered. What areas in relation to the AI do you think need to happen?
Copyright infringement, as seen in Anderson versus Stability AI, where image owners sued AI image generators because of copyrighting.
What about AI with education?
AI, it's a very well-known fact that students use AI to aid them, or in some cases to cheat during exams or for essays. With education, there are ways that AI can help, whether it be helping with study guides. I believe a regulation on how we use AI in education is needed in order to keep situations fair.
Since the states are in control of our education systems,
You can finish.
since the states are in charge of our education systems, we should resort to the 10th Amendment and allow them to decide what they should do with the AI laws.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First unit of the day, the ladies. That was incredible. That analysis with regard to affirmative action and citing Sandra Day O'Connor was just amazing. We took you on so many different paths, and I think you handled it incredibly. Really showed the depth of knowledge, citing executive orders. When I'm asking you what those executive orders are, you have those. The one critique is listen to the question. I know it's so hard when you have all this knowledge in your head and you want to spew it out. But sometimes when you're just spewing out the knowledge, you kind of lose track of the question. So listen to the question. If it's a yes or no, say that first. And then say, and here are some examples. Particularly when I ask, like, at the state level, why does it matter? And you spout Article 1, Section 8, Harvard Land, which is great, but just summarize it. This is why it's important, because at the end of the day, Congress controls Commerce Clause, and the Constitution supreme the law of the land. So if you can provide those answers first, or even just last, that will definitely help. But really incredible answers, such a wide breadth, and you guys should be proud.
Ladies, I was just blown away. So you were fabulous. I loved the tie-in to the Youngstown test with Truman for the presidential executive orders. That one was fabulous. And then just your tying in with Jefferson's letters at the beginning. You just such a wide range of knowledge was shown today. Just amazing preparation.
Yeah, I concur with my colleagues. I think you all did a great job. The written, prepared statement went really smoothly, and I like that you took us in different directions. You cited case law, and it was very clear when you were moving from subject to subject. So that was great. I like the answers to my questions in regard to, what constitutional amendment you proposed. You gave me, something you thought was a good idea, and also backed it up with current events, which I think is great. And same thing with the affirmative action. I know that was a harder question, so I appreciate you all taking the time to answer it. I would say piece of advice would be make sure when you're citing to cases or statutes, you're citing back to the question you're asking. So, it's not that we just get a lot of information because you'll have a lot of knowledge and you're able to show it or relate it back to what the question was.
Great job.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. Good job.
You're walking computer.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, good luck to the rest of the year.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.